You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Connection with someone who shares my aversion to survey and score and really believes in listen and act. Today's guest, Gus Imhof, has spent his entire career in voice of the customer space. Gus even wrote his master's thesis on the ROI of CX for the automotive industry. You know I'm going to be asking him about that. Gus is a strong advocate for getting companies from languishing in the scores of rudimentary surveys to true, actionable decisions, and allowing VOC to provide great governance to a company's decisions. A hearty shout out to the Banksy of LinkedIn, Paul Banks, for facilitating the connection to Gus, building a connection with a fellow customer experience professional I could not wait to meet. Gus comes to us today from Leeds, UK, so I get to bounce back across the pond for this conversation, which is something he's familiar with as well. Gus was born in Brazil, grew up in Switzerland, and now lives in the UK. I love these global experiences. Gus, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. And yeah, thank you for Paul for this amazing connection. It's been a delight so far and cannot wait to see what we get up to in this chat.
That's right. Let's let the rest of the world understand this connection, right? So let's start with surveys, right? That's a big focus here today. And surveys are absolute. They're falling out of favor with a lot of customer experience professionals. But you've told me that it's not surveys that should fall out of favor, but bad surveys. What does a proper survey approach look like to you?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is surveys are everywhere nowadays, and I can't recall a single company that I've worked with or advised where they didn't have some kind of survey in place, right? Is because that's the thing is that's something that you see in the wider customer experience space is because I'm a customer, I think I know what the customer would want. So surely I'm qualified to be a customer experience professional. It's the same thing, right? Is a survey is asking questions. Well, I'm a human being. I talk to other humans. I know how to ask questions. Of course, I'm qualified to write a survey. Right? That's kind of the narrative that goes probably subconsciously, right? That goes in people's mind. But surveys is an art and a science. And the reality is the majority of surveys I receive to this day, and talking about huge brands as well, just don't deliver quality data. And that's the old adage, right? Is rubbish in, rubbish out.
Sure, right.
And if you don't have the right structure, you don't have the right questions, it just doesn't work. And I think that we have all that thing of surveys are dead, surveys are dead, surveys are dead. But yeah, surveys that don't bring you any insights are absolutely dead. Right, there's no doubt about it. But a company that does without surveys is not going to go far either. No matter what those consulting companies that tell you about the power of data analytics and NLP and so on, without surveys, you're not going to go far. They're fundamental.
I think so. First of all, I completely agree in that sense that surveys aren't going away. But going back to the very first thing you said, you said surveys are everywhere, and there's an image that comes to mind. I've seen people talk about it, and I've seen it posted, but I've experienced it, right? And it's that red, yellow, green button in the bathroom. How was your experience today? I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know that I want to share what my experience was. Now, yes, give me a button to say, hey, the bathroom needs some attention so that we can alert you to, hey, look, there's some flooding, there's a mess, there's that kind of thing. But a real survey about my experience in the bathroom feels a little intrusive and perhaps not something that I really want to fill out. And then also I think, who is actually doing anything with the red, yellow, green buttons inside of a bathroom?
And, using that bathroom example it baffles me that until COVID, like you actually had physical buttons to press in those bathrooms.
That's right.
So I mean, like if you think about it, like hygiene 101, literally you go to the bathroom, how many people don't wash their hands before or after? Let's be honest. And you're going to press the same button as them? Now, at least now you have like those motion sensors that actually allows to capture it.
Right.
But we've waited for COVID to happen for that to make sense. That's ridiculous.
You're absolutely right. I wasn't thinking of the hygiene perspective when I was mentioning that, but you're absolutely right. There's another example, the red, yellow, green, that has always cracked me up. It's not a hygiene one, but I remember when I was coming through immigration, I think it was through the Shanghai airport, but it was one of the airports in China. And you're right there at immigration, and you've got the immigration officer there, and they're helping you out, and everything was fine. I have no complaints about it. But there's a red, yellow, green button there of, what was your experience like today? Do you think anyone in their right mind is ever going to push the red button in front of an immigration officer that determines whether you are going to get into the country or not? So talk about gaming a survey. I bet you that score was 100% on whatever score you want to think it is.
Absolutely.
But I know that, okay, so going back to all joking aside, right, good surveys, not the bad surveys. And it requires that thoughtful analysis that you're describing because it has to go beyond the score. Right? We just joked about that 100, right, that you could get there. So how do you do that? How do you go about getting those meaty customer insights that go beyond that score?
So there's a couple of bits, and that in itself could probably be an entire podcast episode on its own, right? But I think the key things are like the most fundamental. Let's imagine I have a consulting client that comes to me and say, look, Gus, we don't have the budget to hire you to rewrite everything for us. Just give us some guidelines.
Right.
What would I tell them? The first one is you need to make sure that the question actually makes sense. What do we mean by that? Don't just jump on NPS because your neighbor's dog told you NPS was fantastic, right? Is think, does it actually make sense?
Right.
Right. And the typical example, and there's lots of industries, but let's take a DVLA in the UK or DMV in the US, right? You go to the driver's agency and they say, would you recommend us? You're like, well, do I have a choice?
Yeah.
Like either you drive or you don't.
Right.
That's it. So why would you drive your decisions on the back of that? And that's the thing is you need to kind of be very literal about the questions you ask and think, as a customer, would I know how to answer this question? And is that the sentiment you want me to have? Like, do you really want to be the most recommended brand? Right. If you are, fantastic. If not, look for something else. So that's the first point. The second point is focus on making sure every question has an owner. Right? It's move away from nice to know and towards need to know. Right? So whenever I'm talking to stakeholders and so on, say, oh, I'd like to ask about this. Okay, fantastic. Why? Why do you care? Oh, it's interesting to know. Okay, what are you going to do with it? Well, it's interesting to know. Okay, let's bin it. Right? Everyone needs to have an owner for that question, because otherwise no one's going to look at the question. No one's going to look at the data, and it's just wasting time for everyone involved.
Boy, I know you've got more points there, but I got to stop for a second. That scope creep, a survey scope creep, is so maddening because you know how it happens. People are sitting in a room and they looked at survey results and like, boy, it would really be nice to know what customers thought on Tuesday afternoon. Let's ask them about the Tuesday afternoon question. You're like, what are you going to do with that? You're going to do nothing with that. And it's just these incremental things that drive you absolutely ape poop. So yes, sorry to stop you down there, Gus, but that one really hits me.
No, but it's brilliant that you did, and it is a beauty when we don't plan it, but it just happens magically. Because the third point I was going to make relates to that, and essentially is that scope creep, right? Is, oh, I want to know about this, and that.
Ah, yeah.
Right, and I have a friend that always uses the McDonald's toilet as an example. Right, if you go to McDonald's and you go in and the toilet is rubbish and disgusting, you're not gonna stop and order a burger. You're just gonna leave. Simple as that, right? So it's not something that's going to delight people. It's going to piss them off. Now, instead of asking them about 15 different aspects that you think is important, turn it on its head, right? So have your lead measure, whether it's CSAT, efforts, whatever it is, and then the why is the meat, right? Why did you tell us that? Why did you answer great, terrible, whatever?
Right.
Because that's the thing, right? Is we kind of, by setting the parameter and say, look, those are the 15 elements that are important, you don't give the client, the customer, the opportunity to tell us what is most important to them.
Right.
And ultimately, it's about what's important to the customer. which is why relying just on analytics is rubbish, because you want to understand what matters to the customer first and foremost. Because if the customer doesn't care, then why should I?
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
That idea of, I've always been a fan of the verbatims, right? That's the point that I want to get out of the survey. The score is good and it helps you measure trends. I'm not anti-score. It's so that you can see how you're doing sort of over time. I get it. But it's the verbatims that really matter. And I thought, to me, it's always about because there's so much gold in there. I hadn't thought of it from the perspective you're offering, and that is, but by focusing on that, you're also not forcing the customer into answering questions about something they don't actually care about. And then the reverse, eliminating an opportunity for them to give you information about something they care about because you shaped your question so specifically. Yeah. That's particularly helpful, Gus.
And that's the thing, right? Is when I started my career in the consulting with voice of customers, we had a set of questions that was satisfaction rating around 5 to 7 elements of a given experience.
Yeah.
So if I go back to the McDonald's example, it will be the speed of service, the friendliness of the staff, let's say the cleanliness of the bathroom, and a number of things, right? And you say, look, customer, those are the 7 things that matter.
Yeah.
Tell us what you care about. But by doing that, we lose out the opportunity to understand what they care about really.
Yeah.
Because all those are weighted equally. And then we rely on statistical models to tell us which one has biggest impact on the KPI, rather than actually, look, human being, if you tell me you're upset, tell me what's upset you. If you tell me you're delighted, tell me what delighted you.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder why that is, because there are good people out there. No one's trying to design a bad survey. And I can imagine that some of this is because imagine years, decades ago when we were trying to understand, well, maybe there weren't the tools to really help us churn through all of those verbatims, because that's a lot of work to do. But in today's world, that's no longer an excuse. You've got so many tools to allow you to take the verbatims and pull the themes out. So I could see in the past, look, I got to ask about these 5 questions because I have no other way to discern if that's really important to them. But in today's world, you're right. You could design a 2 to 3 question survey and get just as much meat as the infinite 15, 30 question survey.
And the thing, and to an extent, I almost think that, and that may sound a bit controversial, but it almost feels like it's a false excuse, right? Because let's say, okay, we don't have any AI, which, by the way, a lot of my projects in the past haven't had any AI, haven't had any theming.
Right.
But it's very simple, right? If you have too many comments to review, then what are you going to do? Just look at how long those are, right? The longer the response, the richer, the more involved, the more passionate they are.
Yeah.
Because you get more value from that, right? It was great or rubbish. That's not going to tell you anything.
Right.
But those that really expand, they're your golden nuggets to use in your reporting, but they also give you really an understanding of how challenging or how amazing something is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all for the AI, but there were ways already.
Oh, and completely agree. Yeah, certainly. I don't want to unscience. Boy, there's a word. I'm going to make up a word here. So let's not do that. I'm going to try not to be so anti-scientific because I actually do believe in the tools and all of that. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, okay, if you don't have it, you can't afford it, you're a beginning company, that kind of, just read them. Just read the verbatims. Go through there. You'll get a feel and go through that. And maybe you'll be imprecise, but so what? You will have at least got yourself started down that journey. Now,
exactly.
Related to this idea of customer verbatims, you mentioned a key customer experience concept to me before. Memories. Why are memories so important to understanding customer experience?
Because the reality is, Rick, and that's probably my most controversial thought I put out every couple of weeks, is customer experience does nothing for your business, right? The experience your customer has with your brand does not impact your bottom line. What impacts your future performance is what they remember from those experiences, right? Now, the reality is those are distinct things. what happens and what I remember what happens are two different things. And in the Customer Experience 3 book, I have a chapter that talks exactly about that. And the fundamental piece that I use as an example is the legal system, right? It's look at cases where the star arguments towards or against someone being accused is an eyewitness.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right.
Yeah,
and we see the eyewitness is the most reliable, is the smoking gun, right? Is the most reliable asset any lawyer can have in their arsenal.
Right.
Now, what if I told you that both in simulated environments, in laboratory environment, and in real life, study shows consistently that between 20 to 40% of eyewitnesses identify the wrong person.
Wow. It's scary, frightening, and all of the above, but God, it doesn't surprise me as you say it like that. So exactly, eyewitnesses is not your strongest, right? So,
and that's the thing, right? But we say, but essentially we rely on their memory. Like the only thing that makes those eyewitnesses valuable from that legal perspective is their memory. Yet their memory is fallible.
And I see how that, I can already kind of see where you're getting there, but take me to, so how does that apply then to the reason why memories matter so much for customer experience?
Because that's the thing is, I'm never going to be able to make decisions based on what happens, only on what I remember from those experiences, right? Yeah. And that's why you have so many cases of, in the contact center, for example, where a client seems incredibly unreasonable and obviously they're lying and they're just trying to get advantage.
Okay.
Maybe they're not. Maybe their recollection of the events is different than what actually happened. Maybe it's factually incorrect, but it's their perception, it's their vision of it. It's what they will use for their future decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could sit back and say, oh, look, we're victim of that and we can't do anything. But the reality is, science has moved a lot along the way, and we know what makes something more or less memorable.
Right.
So if we design for memorability, then we can encourage our customers to remember us in a positive light at the right time. So they remember us for the right reasons at the right time, i.e., whenever they're going to buy next. And that's the thing, is making that dissociation between memory and experience is something that's so fundamental, because if you only focus on what they remember, you're prioritizing what actually matters to them.
That's an interesting concept. Design for memorability. Oh boy. I am a podcaster, right? Apparently I can't talk today. So design for memorability. I'll have to work on that. But the concept, whether I can pronounce it or not, doesn't matter. But the concept really fits. That's interesting. The idea that it's not the actual experience, but it's what they remember. And brands that have become such a delight, right? Especially in the real experience space. When you're talking about either hospitality or entertainment, have gotten that right because that's just the nature of their business. But the idea that you're expanding it down to, okay, even if you're in a retail store, you're in a contact center, what does that design look like when it's about the memory, not about the experience? Now, we're talking about measurements, and I don't want to throw the measurements out, right? We talked about that, this idea, but I know that you've been a part of companies that have found themselves on all over in their journey of customer experience and voice of the customer measurement when it comes to the maturity on that journey. What are some examples where you've been a part of where the traditional metrics just don't quite fit?
So there's lots of industries, right, where it just don't fit. And I think the best example was NPS with the DMV.
Absolutely.
Right? It just doesn't work. The example I always use on why transactional NPS doesn't make sense is, imagine you're a diehard Apple fan, like you get every product they release, every single year you upgrade and so on.
Uh-huh.
Then you go to the contact center because at one time you have a problem with one of your devices, and you call the contact center. And the person treats you like garbage. Worst call you had in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Comes a survey. How likely are you to recommend Apple based on this interaction?
Right.
Like, humans are unable to make that distinction, right? We cannot compartmentalize and say, look, let's forget everything I have for the last 15 years being known by everyone in my life as the Apple fan, and review just that one interaction. Doesn't work. There's too much halo effect. we need to be independent enough and say, look, you know what? I don't need satisfaction. I don't need NPS. I don't need effort, because sometimes it doesn't work. So you need to understand what would make sense in that scenario. So we need to kind of move away from those 3 core metrics. They may be suitable, but let's not be shy about saying, you know what, those are not the right metric.
Let's take a little break here. Let's walk away from the world of metrics and CSATs. Sometimes it can be a little exhausting, and even with travel, we can get a little worn out. So why don't you join me here in the First Class Lounge? Take a break here. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
From my past, I'd say the family ranch in Brazil.
I want to know more about that and how I can go. Where is the family ranch in Brazil?
So it sounds incredibly posh when you say it like that, right? It sounds really fancy, but essentially, because Brazil is very much a continental country, there's a lot of cheap real estate about 1 or 2 hours from the big urban areas, and most middle class, let's say middle class families, have their own ranch. And to me, I remember it as the opportunity to disconnect from the rest of the world. It's so recluse, you don't even have cell service.
Nice.
And you just in the middle of nowhere, huge bits of greenery, the dogs and so on, and you just enjoy time with the family. And that's kind of the perfect place to just disconnect and relax and recharge batteries.
Okay, after the episode, when I stop recording, I may have to ask you a little bit more about this when we're off the record here. But you may have just created my dream travel location for the future. But what's a dream travel location that you've not been to yet?
Japan.
Oh, yeah? Japan's come up a lot for me recently in the episodes. Tell me why that's a trigger for you. Why Japan?
I don't know. I grew up loving a lot of the inputs of the Japanese culture, right? Because they have all the gaming, they have all the manga culture and so on. And it is, if they open the borders in time, it is meant to be my trip in November this year. So I'm hoping they'll open up in time and I'll be able to take that one out of the list.
Nice. Well, travel and food go hand in hand. What is a favorite thing to eat?
Swiss cheese fondue.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that does sound. Now, the problem is it's kind of mid-morning here. I'm getting a little hungry. I need my snack. Swiss cheese fondue may not be the best snack, but that does sound good.
Come on.
What on the other side of it, what's a thing your parents forced you to eat but you hated as a kid?
Any veggie whatsoever.
Any. All of them.
Oh, yeah. It's to this day, like there's very few vegetables I actually can stand to eat. I'm not blaming it on them. I'm just saying that's a fact, right? To this day, I eat very few veggies.
That's funny. What is one travel item, not including your phone, you will not leave home without?
Not including the phone.
That's right.
Yeah, and obviously saying a tablet or a computer is an absolute cop-out.
Yeah, no, that's cheating. Okay.
Yeah, it's absolute cheating. I know. I'll probably say a Kindle then.
All right, well, as we exit the First Class Lounge and all of that travel, I know with a birthplace of Brazil, growing up years in Switzerland and now UK-based, you've got quite a global perspective. How has that influenced the way you approach your global clients?
I think, Rick, it comes down to that element of diversity, right? Is diversity inclusion is a huge, huge topic in the business world nowadays, and rightly so. But the reality is, it's not about ethnicity or origin or whatever, but it's a diversity of thought, and it just happens that background does it. So what brings to the table is, I think very laterally about a lot of topics because my experience is so different from everyone else's, right? I mean, and I posted about it recently on LinkedIn. I'm a minority in so many ways, right? Because when I go to Brazil, I'm the Swiss guy. When I go to Switzerland, I'm the Brazilian guy. In the UK, I'm a foreigner anyway.
Right.
And even within people that live here, I live in the north of England, not the south.
Okay.
So I have a minority point of view on many things. And that means that I'm very left field in many things that I think, that's where comes that concept from the memories. There aren't many people that speak about that because it's just people tend to focus on this, gravitate towards the same thing. So you look at memories, you look at my challenge on the core metrics. And I think it's just, I look at things in a way that's very pragmatic and very commercially led because of the life I've lived of going through so many different cultures, and I'm just a mishmash of all of those.
That diversity of thought, diversity of experience, it is so valuable in business. Heck, I even had I can't even think to how long ago. His episode came out June of 2021, but Todd Sears' episode was called The Return on Equality. And the idea was business return through equality, meaning embracing all of these different thoughts, embracing the different diversity of experiences and all of that. And I think there's a real business application that the businesses that have put real action to it, as opposed to lip service. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great. I've got, some statements or something like that, but actual real action towards that. It has generated better business return, better understanding of their customer, because guess what? Their customers are diverse. Their customers have multiple experiences, and the best way to understand that diversity is to have that inside your own company's understanding. Yeah. And so I can see how your global perspective has certainly brought that to bear with your clients today.
And that's the thing, right? And I've done some research about that recently, and there's no shortage of arguments on why you want applied diversity and inclusion, right? Not, sure. As you said, not just lip service, but implication. And the first one that comes to mind as we were talking about that previous episode is teams that are generally diverse and inclusive, right? You need to include those people because diversity just to tick the box doesn't work. But teams that are generally diverse make decisions twice as fast, make better decisions, and with, surprise, surprise, a lot fewer meetings.
Nice. Ooh, right? I like that.
I mean, fewer meetings, faster decisions, and better decisions overall. I mean, what's not to like?
That's awesome.
In a world where there's far too many meetings, cut half of the meetings on your agenda.
Right.
Look at all the time you got back.
Right. Absolutely. No, I love that. Hey, Gus, speaking of time, I just took a quick look at the clock, and we are almost out of time, but I do not want to let our conversation finish without talking about that master's thesis. And I know it's been a while ago, but you wrote a master's thesis about the ROI, return on investment, of customer experience for the automotive industry. I know it's been a while, but tell me a little bit about that thesis. Let's close out on that.
Sounds good. Yeah, a while. This was 2015. So I wrote in 2015, and the goal was really to look at several metrics to help us understand the ROI of CX in the automotive industry. And if anyone is interested in reading it, it was published in 2019 in the International Journal of Market Research. And the name was The Dawn of CX Metrics.
I'll get that in the show notes so that people can look that up if they'd like to.
And essentially what we did is we plotted customer satisfaction. And when I say satisfaction, one of the more complex ones, not just how satisfied are you, NPS, and the wallet allocation rule by Timothy Cunningham, as well as the EXQ, so the experience quality from Phil Klaus and Stan Macklin. And I used all of those and I compared them to see, so which one actually better predicts repurchasing intention for automotive.
Okay.
And it was fascinating to see that actually none of them was actually powerful.
Huh.
Right? Some even had the negative relation. The better you experience, the lower your repurchase intention of the same brand.
Oh my.
Which is interesting, right? But if you think about it, if you absolutely love a car to bits, if you're into cars and you absolutely love that car to bits, the last thing you want to do is replace it.
Oh.
Right? You're going to hold on to it, right? You're going to keep up.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. It was really interesting to help us understand a bit more that industry in itself, but to actually show, look, the established metrics that we have aren't that great. And yes, NPS is one question. It's fantastic. But one question isn't enough. It's too narrow, right? Because we need to remember it's a proxy. Like if anyone tells you, I know how to measure customer experience, call them out because it's wrong. No one can measure experience. We're just using proxies that may or may not make sense in our scenarios.
Boy, that now I have an even greater insight because I did not know. You and I had not talked about this other than the label of ROI of CX for the automotive industry, where it went. It really helps me understand how that shapes so much of your thinking when it comes to what you shared here in the episode. The idea of the metrics are just that, just a proxy. Memories are where the focus needs to be, and understanding how memories are different. You've got some very interesting thoughts around customer experience, and it actually goes to that question I asked earlier, that I love having that diversity of thought, because you've actually kind of changed some of my thinking, and my synapses are breaking a little bit as I process what we've talked about today. So Gus, I really appreciate it. Thank you for that. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about what your approach, and maybe even benefit from your help someday, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
So best way is my LinkedIn, Gustavo Imhof.
Okay.
And alternatively, you can also go on my website, so cxahead.com. And that's where you find a lot of the articles I've created in the past, reports, publications, webinars, podcasts, and so on.
Okay.
That's the best place to find out more about what I've done in the past. But anyone's more than welcome to reach out through LinkedIn.
Awesome.
It's usually the best platform.
It is funny how we all find each other there, as you and I did. And so listeners, don't even just scroll down. Keep listening, scroll down. All that information's there. Click the links and you'll be able to get in touch with Gus. Gus, thanks so much for today. Again, you did kind of break some of my synapses in a good way, so I've got new ways of thinking, really insightful perspective. I hope that maybe you find a vegetable that's one of your favorites sometime in the future, but that's okay. There's plenty of other great food out there as well. So thanks again, Gus. It was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.